This week, the UN met, and Secretary General Antonio Guterres made some statements that are quite amazing. So I want to talk about thinking globally a little bit. I want to talk about future world. What he said was, our world is in peril and paralyzed. He said, let us work as one, as a coalition of the world, as United Nations. And he urged leaders to gather to do this. He said Russia's invasion of the Ukraine has unleashed a global food crisis that we have not yet seen play out, but we will. He said the UN goals for 2030, including ending extreme poverty, ensuring quality education for all children, and achieving gender equality. And he said some things can't wait. Among them is education, dignified jobs, full equality for women and girls, comprehensive health care, and to tackle the climate crisis. Man, oh man, that is a heavy load. He ain't heavy, Father, he's my brother. What the hell? Seriously. How do we do this? The coalition that has defined us as a global community is coming apart. Yet, as chaos teaches, new ways of organizing with new understandings of who we might be are being constructed somewhere in the dark, out there beyond the horizons of any new day that we can see. And there's only one way that we as a human family, as a species, as those who have dominion over the earth, can both survive and thrive. And that way is together. Together. You know, it's an important revolutionary thought that we first see some 2,500 years ago, around 400 before the Common Era. Socrates says, I am not an Athenian, nor am I a Greek, but a citizen of the world. That's just as revolutionary today as it was then. After World War II, the world thought as one. The stench of death just clung to the human family, a stink that brought with it an existential threat that was of a whole new order that made us think of the planet, and that was the atom bomb. It's an amazing thing what that did. And forced us. But the stench of death is worn off. We don't see it anymore. We don't feel it. And so it seems to pass us by. The world, we humans, together organized what was called the United Nations. It was a place that took a global view of all that was happening, politically, economically, environmentally, and conflictually. And it seems to me that an integral element in a healthy future world will be some kind of global citizenship, our belonging to this fabric of life itself that has no geopolitical boundaries, where individuals join themselves with the concerns outside their community and experience the discomfort. This is where empathy comes in, that semi-permeability. Think globally, act locally. It's been around since the late 60s, early 70s, but we're just now beginning to see it. It's interesting, I was learning the song after the gold rush, and Neil Young wrote that song after reading some sci-fi scripts. And you don't find many sci-fi songs, but the whole thing is Mother Nature on the run in the 1970s. We knew in the 1970s that, after we had, there's no more resources to go after. We know what the resources are as a planet, and it's now time to shift our paradigm to managing those. It seems to me also that this week I did a lot of Googling, and one of them was the global citizenship movement. Check it out. It's really good. And even if, to become an activist is a lot of energy. And of course, if you have it, go for it. If you don't, at least read on it and start adopting some of those ways, because we need to, the individuals need to, and we've talked about story, to begin to think about our politics, our morality, our economics, and our cultures in some new global way. We are the one that has become the many. We are working and waking to this wonder of who we are and our place in the universe. Schrodinger said, I love this quote, "The total number of minds in the universe is one. In fact, consciousness is a singularity phasing within all beings." Think about that. It's like time sharing on a computer. You got 1,000 computers across the country, and they're all sharing time in these little nanoseconds. They're phasing in and out of each other. It's a trippy thing. And remember Einstein's quote, "All sense of separation is optical delusion." So I guess I want to say, I want to invite us all to become global citizens. And I pose a question to my cohorts. Bob Hayes is coming from Florida. Marianne is coming from Spokane Valley, Washington. I'm up on the South Hill in Spokane. So, my friends, how can us everyday people begin to think and see ourselves as global citizens? And Bob, I'll start with you. What say you, bro?
Well, I'll say I'll try to set my pessimism aside a little bit, try and be a little more positive this week. Well, I think number one, we, and in terms of citizens of the United States, we have to get out and vote. We have to vote for those politicians who support the ideas of moving toward a more global view of ourselves. That includes not voting for climate change deniers, not voting for election deniers, searching for as much truth as we can. And so that's the minimum that we can do, is just get out there and vote. And of course, there's a lot of different organizations that we could back, and there's a lot of different ways to become an activist if you have the energy to do that. But most of all, I think that we can just dedicate ourselves to treating each other a little bit better.
Amen. Marianne, how about you?
Well, I think, one of the things that you talked about in your opening was the idea of this connection, that we're all connected. And if COVID hasn't really brought that home like nothing else, that what happened, we are all connected. And the idea that I think part of what's happened is we have been desensitized to disasters because they are bombarding us and they're coming at us on this, continual basis. And so I think we need to resensitize ourselves to what's actually happening in the world. And I love the global citizenship movement, and I definitely will look into that, because that is something that even if I can't jump in and be an active part in it, I can educate myself on it. And I think that is going to be huge. And like Bob talked about, using the power that you have within your own country to make sure that the people that are representing you and are actually representing what you believe in. There's this us and ours and me and mine mentality. And we need to move to the us and ours, because we are all going to live together and die together, create more suffering for each other, or we can help alleviate suffering for each other. And so I think that's, and it does go beyond our borders. It is global, and we have to start thinking in those terms.
And, we're trying to find new ways of thinking about ourselves. Someone, I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson, said, if the earth was the size of a tennis ball, it would be smoother than a cue ball. Think about that. We think of our atmosphere and all our big tall mountains and deep oceans. It's beginning to think of this planet as an island. I want to say miracle, but it's an island improbability at least. And Bob, you said you didn't want to be a pessimist. Well, I'm not sure I'm a pessimist or an optimist, but I'm a realist, and we're in deep shit. The planet is in deep shit. Not only do we have atomic bombs, but we have all kinds of nerve chemicals now. We have ways to, cut people's communications off. Turn their plumbing off from around the world. It's an amazing thing where we are today, and the new world that we live in, we haven't retooled our brains yet. What did Einstein say? Everything's changed but the way we think. So I'm a realist, and right now, as a realist, and I love, romantics and what I call the light people. On Facebook, it's light and love, and it's all light. And I realize I'm not a light and love guy. I'm a darkness guy. I want to dive into the dark and go, what the fuck is going on here, for God's sake, or somebody's sake, or maybe nobody's sake? That's the whole issue. How do we, and I think, Marianne, you nailed it, there ain't no us and them. I said it in my opening statements. We do this together or we die. We live together and thrive, or we die together. It's really that much. And right now, if you look at the global people who've declared themselves global citizens, most of them are the rich people. They're the Beyoncés of the world, that can get in a jet and travel somewhere and pollute. Get in a jet and two people fly to an environmental air pollution festival or something. I go, what the hell? How do we get us? How do we get us in that? Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, let me extend that question a little bit. How do we get the haves to share with the have-nots? Because most of this planet are the have-nots. And they've been fooled into thinking that the haves really have their best interest at heart, when that is demonstrably not the case. They have the interest of keeping what they have. And as long as they can keep the have-nots from rising up against them, then they're happy. All of these different crises, energy, food, climate, the haves will just stay in their bubble and be just fine. If you notice the people they're interviewing, when we have these environmental disasters, floods, fires, famines, none of those people are rich. You see them on the news every night. They're interviewing them. Well, I don't know. My house is gone. I have nothing. The mansion that sits on the hill isn't affected by the flood.
There's a great scene out of the morning show where they do an article on the guy who owns the station, because he's hired his own firefighters to protect his property from the fire. And, right. There you go.
Well, and that's where we get back to what is our individual responsibility. What can we do? And you're right. There are a lot more have-nots than there are haves. And it's the whole idea of a union, right? That the have-nots, all of us, need to come together and recognize that we do have power when we unite, when we stand together. And the economic disparity that exists in this world is something that has to change, because you should not be able to hire your own firefighters while the houses down the street burn. That's what our taxes are supposed to be for, right? To join together, to create a community that works, that helps each other. And so I think that's something that is going to be really pivotal.
But that's where our votes are so important. We have to have people in positions of power that see the problem, that are willing to give up some of their own, or to work toward convincing other people to give up some of their own, rather than just accepting money from lobbyists and so forth. There's more lobbyists in this country than there are politicians.
So what is it that creates global citizenship? What do we want of our leaders? What do we want of each other? And I'm going to go to what's called the International Development Education Association out of Scotland. And this is what they said: a global citizen possesses awareness of social, cultural, political, environmental, and economic issues both on a local and global scale, active community participation in addressing societal issues for a more equitable and sustainable world, respect for other cultures and embrace of diversity, lack of tolerance for social injustice. I love that. My daughter has no tolerance for social injustice, and she's in every protest. She's on the streets. I love that about her. And then responsibility for our actions. So we can all become global citizens without a passport. By the way, there are no global citizen passports. They're just starting to have what's called a world passport, but only a few countries recognize them. Who do you go to get that, I wonder?
Go to the aliens to get that.
So what I want us to talk about is how do we engender in each other, because I think it's not a trickle-down theory, it's a trickle-up theory. That, it's somewhere between 100 monkeys and Dharma, I guess, that when enough people start catching on, then it trickles up to the people in power, because it basically changes the cultural milieu in which those power structures operate. And I think that that's part of why both Amazon and Starbucks are really fighting against unions. They're fighting against people getting together. So how do we engender in them? And I know that, a big piece of this is always stories. I think part of what's going on is the stories are little seed pods that get planted in us, and that those stories do have consequences. I can't wait to see the new Avatar, and now there's Andor, I can't remember what it is, on Disney. I love that stuff. It's like, plant away. Put it in me and let me see what can grow out of it. The original Avatar, think about what the whole backstory was. It was all predicated on a backstory of the Earth having depleted itself and created something less than a global culture. And so the powers that be were still going out for the energy and the power and the et cetera, at the cost of culture and morality and economics and their political view. So we have to create this. And I'm a dying breed, and I hate to tell you to, but so are you. That I worry for our grandchildren, and I speak that not just mine, but all of the next few generations. What are they going to face? How do they create a global consciousness in the midst of this? And I love Schrodinger's thing. It's all just phasing, man. It's a single thing phasing in and out of us.
Well, and I think it can be really frustrating, because you mentioned something from the 1970s. So that was over 50 years ago. We did nothing. And there were people that were shouting at the top of their lungs, and it was just like they were spitting in the wind, because nobody was listening. And now we're in this place of, we have to listen. We have to wake up. And for those who think they can top it with their own fire department, that's not going to stop a tornado or a hurricane ripping through. That's not going to stop individual personal tragedies that can happen within their own lives. And I think that's what we have to start to understand. All of that money can insulate you up to a certain point, but and unfortunately, the idea of suffering being a catalyst for change. And sometimes people have to suffer. And right now, we are seeing so much suffering in this world. And if we don't, we're going to die.
I agree with you completely. But again, the people that are suffering aren't the people that can make the change. The people that can make the change are happy the way it is now.
We're getting intermittence here, so I'll just butt in because Bob froze. So how do we engender these higher things? We know, what you're saying is, there's 1,000 metaphors for what you guys are saying. How the rich, they take a little fear and they brew it into hate and they turn it against us so that they control the resources and we get a little trickle of it. There's all kinds of ways of talking about that. However, the word that comes to mind is interconnectedness. You can only deny it for so long, and then it comes and bites your ass. I mean, it really does. It's an amazing thing that it can't be escaped. Although, you look at some of the sci-fi stuff, and the rich are living in a bubble, and we're paying for air and water and all that stuff. So how do we get people to be more aware of social, cultural, political, environmental, economic issues globally and locally? See, the right is a content people. The left is a context people, at least in this country. And it's really interesting to see how content is manipulated against itself and without any contextual background, so that the narrative can shift quite easily, and how the context people, which is, weather and climate is happening with a larger context, and we put something into that and made it what it is. And how do we grow that awareness? Does it always get back to stories? We just keep the storytellers telling the iconoclastic stories? Is that the best we have? Oh, crap.
Am I frozen again?
Yeah, but you're good now. Go.
I have yet to see an interview of somebody in a disaster that is asked, what do you think about climate change? Do you think climate had something to do with your house floating down the river? Would you vote for someone who denied climate change? Put it real out. Say, look, you chose the people who are creating policies that destroyed your home. What do you do about it? It doesn't always have to be a movie. And I'm very disappointed in the media. Disappointed.
Well, and I was going to say, Bob, and that is what we need, right? And yet, if someone did, right, because they're bringing these kind of things, and that's where the narrative, and you're right, our media needs to become what it's supposed to be. It needs to be that fourth estate. It needs to be bringing awareness to people. And, the idea that, and I think it comes back down to personal responsibility and the importance of each one of us taking personal responsibility for our lives. And I'm not an optimist or a pessimist either, but I see it all the time. I'm out there in the community and I'm working with people and I'm talking to people. And there are so many people that are thinking, for the greater good. What they want to do in the world is they, even through their own private businesses, they want to impact and make the world a better place. They want to help people when they have disaster. They want to be able to expand their own goodwill out into the community. And it starts there. And then we go out further and further and further until it becomes a world movement. So I think there are people that are trying, and the young people today, some of the ideas, some of the things that I see are phenomenal. And I think as the older generation, even though I don't like to put myself in that category, I am. It's like we are handing off the baton. We have to put some faith in these people. And then how do we support them? How do we support those who have the energy to be able to go out there and make the changes that need to happen?
Amen. And we're getting towards the end. I just want to make one comment. There is a whole lot of forces that impede what is real and true from getting out. For instance, weather reporters, they are not allowed to put the weather within the context of climate change, so that locally we don't get that. Once that impact is news, then the news people are cool to report it. But it can't be reported. It's really weird the way that works and how that works. So we're at the end of our time. Marianne, final comments on global citizenship? Future world?
Future world. I to think that we are going to survive. And earlier in the broadcast, you talked about the darkness and the light. And I think that we can shine lights into the darkness. And the more we do that, the more people are going to be able to wake up. We're to be in this together, or we're not. And if we don't, those comments felt for generations if the human species even survives.
Bob, final comments?
Well, go back to the idea of personal responsibility. Personal responsibility is it's personal, and depending on in terms of your need hierarchy, if you're just struggling to survive, your priority is to get food on the table for your family. So we have to look at bringing everybody up the luxury to think about global issues and not just think about, well, how am I going to pay my rent next month? So I hope that we can get those numbers to shift. I will try to remain optimistic about it.
Amen. And, part of what this journey has been about is how do we be real? Seriously, how do we be real? And at the same time, not get bogged down by the negative stuff so that, we are able to be in the battle and not be moved by the battle. This is where the Bhagavad Gita, and that's on my reading list. I've read the Bhagavad Gita at least 3 or 4 times, different versions. And it's really about Dharma. What is your personal path? What is the truth of you? And how do you best express that through your life? My wife, she's got a job working with homeless in an organization that's funded mostly by Catholic sisters. She's doing her Dharma. It's just amazing to watch her at work. It's just amazing. The path of the truth of our being. How do we do that? Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita is on the battlefield, and he realizes the people he has to go and kill are part of who he is. That it's one part large singularity. So what do? Well, you do your Dharma. Next week, we're going to go to Dharma. Who you are, how you are, why you are, and what can you do with it. My friends, be blessed in all that you do and with every breath.